Hello folks, not much time has passed since the last video. Some of you might know that the inability and reluctance of my hospital in Germany to provide me with the medical documents is preventing me from getting any further contacts going, contacts that I will need for my follow-up cancer treatment. No second opinion or treatment, not even a fit-to-fly assessment is possible without these documents and the corresponding image data. In the last video, I presented two receipts from registered letters that I sent out to my hospital. The first one got lost at some postal hub, but the second reached its recipient in time. And lo and behold, there was a reaction from the hospital. But as you might have guessed already, they still managed to avoid sending just one single document. Instead, there was just some random gibberish about how sorry they are, about what kind of failure I am as a patient, and that the legal department will be in charge of my case from now on. The legal department sent me an invoice regarding the cost of the documents that I ordered, and now they expect me to pay money up front before they start to move just 1 inch. Well, alright. In Germany, everything health related is handled with invoices and bills once the treatment has been completed. This even applies to most of the stuff that's not covered by health insurance at all. So in fact, it is very unusual to risk further weeks of delays just because of the very slight chance of losing a laughable small amount of money due to the cost of printing and sending out one letter. They are simply using every bit of leeway that the laws in Germany offer to obstruct my progress. That much is clear. And of course I immediately sent out the money, since this is about my life and not just some stupid game on who is right or wrong in kindergarten. I will present the genuine letters right here, with all the names of persons or institutions removed, as to not violate any personal or privacy rights in Germany. Since the correspondence is of course in German, I will try to translate them. It's not my profession, so please bear with me regarding the quality. The last time I translated something must have been in school, like 2 decades ago. Getting things right in terms of content is more important than sounding nice and well-rounded. Usually, I would just rewrite everything from scratch in English, but this defeats the purpose of the matter at hand. And last but not least, I will include the full content of my own registered letter so that you know what I was asking for in the first place, and if the reaction is appropriate. Since it's pretty long, I will also display an English version of it on screen in addition to reading it aloud. So let's head into it. What you're looking at here is a letter that I received from the legal department, and it's about the costs of copying and also postage regarding the medical documents that I requested. They want to get 50 euro cents a piece for 50 pages. This is probably the printout from my electronic patient file. I wonder if these are color prints, as they are quite expensive. Then there are another 6 pages for which they ask 15 euro cents a piece. I guess these refer to the results from the external laboratory to which they sent tissue samples of my tumor to. Their own pathology on site was unable to pinpoint the exact type and nature of my tumor, probably because of the tissue being too degenerated and necrotic already. 2.50 euros are required for a CD/DVD comprising of the various MRI and CT scans they ordered. I'm curious if there will be some photos or videos taken during surgery included as well. And with the addition of 3 euros postage costs, we are looking at the gigantic sum of 31 euros and 40 cents. And what's written below is, please transfer the required amount to one of our bank accounts listed below within the next 4 weeks while using the following description. I removed the description due to references to personal data. And continuing, as soon as the required amount has been received, and we will send out the order documents as soon as possible. We hope that you will be able to understand why we are forced to make use of this procedure. And by this, they are talking about the requirement to pay upfront, despite the rather modest sum in question. As you can see, they promised to prepare 56 pages. This is quite a step up from the 1.5 pages that I received since I had my surgery more than 4 months ago. These pages acted as a letter of discharge, including a short summary of results of a tumor board conference that they sent me in late December 2017. What applies to both of them is that there was laughable little information to be found. I'm especially keen on the additional pathology report that they ordered from a specialized laboratory in southern Germany, because they couldn't pinpoint the exact type and parameters of my sarcoma with their own laboratory, leaving quite a few uncertainties in the process. One thing I like to preview regarding this is that in Rotterdam in the Netherlands, they did an advanced test called FISH on the tissue that they gathered during a biopsy that they made, and all results, including this somewhat complex and also expensive FISH test, were available 4 days after the biopsy. In addition, I received all internal communication between the different departments of the cancer hospital in Rotterdam regarding my case as a PDF. My Dutch doctors provided everything without hesitance and also without delay. In Germany, it took 2 months until the last results were available to the hospital itself, with me as a patient not knowing anything up to this day, more than 4 months later. 4 days versus 4 months, Netherlands versus Germany. Do I need to tell you more? Of course not, but I will keep going nonetheless. Now, this letter, as well as the procedure of payment upfront that they opt for, isn't very satisfying to begin with, but I don't think that they can keep obstructing and delaying things much longer. Of course, it will be interesting to see what documents that they will send out. One way to further hamper my progress would be to omit some important pages due to whatever reason. They know exactly what data and information I need to get other hospitals and doctors involved, and I'm curious to see if they want to continue playing games. With our registered letter, we provided a sheet that they are legally required to fill out. They need to sign there and confirm that the printout is in fact complete. We'll try to ignore this form. But enough of this right now. I expect the documents to arrive in the next 1 or 2 weeks, and then I will have to get all of it translated into English by professionals. I won't busy myself with this as I don't have the proper qualification. Getting a Japanese translation would be difficult and of course much more expensive. I don't know where fate will lead me in the future, so with English my flexibility will be as high as it can possibly get. At the leading cancer centers in Japan, there shouldn't be much trouble with English documents, even in the case that there would be issues. A Japanese translation will be cheaper and easier to organize once I'm over there myself. Let's turn our attention to the letter that the actual head of the sarcoma surgery department sent me. Again, I will present the German letter, providing translation. Please note that this is the first letter that we ever received from the hospital, aside from the still incomplete letter of discharge, where follow-up treatment or life expectancy, for example, aren't even getting mentioned just one single time. Dear Mr. and Mrs., with this we confirm receiving your registered letter. We are troubled by the fact that your son is adamant in his decision to evade the necessary follow-up treatment. The urgently required radiation therapy is limited to a time frame of 8 to 9 weeks post-surgery. As of now, this window of opportunity has long passed. Furthermore, we regret that your son is continuing to decline to visit us in person for post-surgery aftercare, as well as for the purpose of a conversation. During such an appointment, the questions that you came up with in your letter could easily get addressed by us. Since you threatened to take legal actions against our hospital in your letter, we are forced to delegate this matter to our legal department for the purpose of obtaining your medical files, as well as all further questions regarding this matter in particular. Please get into contact with the legal department. That aside, and regarding the well-being of your son, we would like to have him come in for post-surgery aftercare, as well as a discussion to clear things up. No matter your decision, we hope that your son will recuperate, and we wish you the best of luck for whatever path you decide upon in the future. Sincerely, signed head of the sarcoma surgery department. Now, this is actually quite a handful. Things are starting to get ugly now. For a start, I would like to point out that I already discussed a lot of the issues at hand in videos number 4 and 7 exclusively, with number 9 having some remarks included as well. Since you can't fake any upload dates on YouTube, these might be of use in the future. Also one of the reasons why I tried to get this video right here out of the door ASAP, to act as some sort of diary that I can refer to if necessary. The biggest surprise, even for me, is that he claims that post-surgery radiation treatment, also called adjuvant radiotherapy, is supposedly limited to a rather short time frame and direct succession to the surgery. It wouldn't be that odd if it would be true, since procedural details like this are often omitted from papers and studies, and thus hard to come by for someone like me, who has to rely on these sources to get information on the disease and the correlating prognosis. And this sort of mistake on my part emphasizes even more the importance of doctors that are willing and able to discuss and explain things with and to you, which isn't the case with the people that I have to deal with. This isn't just some isolated hiccup, it's how things are getting handled over there at the hospital all the time. We ran into issues with this before my surgery, during my inpatient stay as well as afterwards. They prescribe large bottles of antibiotics meant for infusions, failing to note that the liquid should get poured onto my bandages before use, not administered intravenously. Apothecaries and other doctors alike were clueless on what to do with the infusion stuff, as it made no sense. We were obliged to buy the materials ourselves, and in Germany you can't even get needles and other infusion tools without special permission. No instructions or remarks regarding the bandages were made, and other doctors were afraid to take them off as a consequence. From the Dutch wound nurses we received detailed listings on bandage types and locations in both English and German. They even made lists solely consisting of German products, so that there would be no problems with some items just being available in the Netherlands. There's more, but I will leave it at that for now. Communication is not the strong point of the staff at my German hospital, as they rely on telepathy instead, not just with their patients, but with other departments of their own hospital and external doctors / medical personnel as well. And you can clearly make out the red thread regarding this across all my videos that relate to this topic. Now back to the letter. While the sarcoma surgeons made clear that time would surely be a factor regarding follow-up treatment and that I shouldn't wait too long with it, they failed to produce any kind of estimate. No single number or date has ever been mentioned by them. The only number I ever got was not from the surgeons, but from the deputy head of the radiotherapy department, who said that I got 6 months left before it would be too late. This discussion took place mid-November 2017, so with this in mind, the time window should have remained open until May 2018, which is still some way down the road as of now, at the end of January of the same year. And now the chief sarcoma surgeon comes along and tells me that radiation treatment is not possible anymore, more than 2 months after it became obsolete. Seriously? They know our address, our phone number, our email address. We constantly ask them for medical documents face to face, by email and by letters. I've collected 7 different occasions on which my mother and me asked for my documents to be able to get a second opinion or treatment somewhere else, but they kept ignoring us, brushing our requests aside. Of course, you could argue that I gambled with the way I was handling things, that I misjudged their general attitude, instead of them taking things more seriously after I decided to not show up personally anymore, equipping my mother with all the legally required mandates to discuss, negotiate, as well as act in my stead. Not only they continued to keep my documents locked up, but on top they never tried to establish any kind of contact, not even to fabricate some kind of assurance for their own purposes, by sending one last letter warning me of the consequences of not acting on the spot, just in case this matter would ever get in front of a judge. But complete ignorance was something that I didn't expect at all. I promised to be honest on this channel, and I couldn't think of stuff derailing the way it did. What I also mentioned in my older videos is that winning medical cases like this in German courts is nigh impossible. 5 to 10% of cases are won by patients, and that's it. So they might not need this kind of safety net after all. They are in fact one of the largest hospitals around, so they should have quite some experience with things like that. In case you've watched video number 9, which directly preceded this one right here, you also know that we have issues with missing parcels and letters. I can't rule out that the hospital did send one letter sometime down the road and that it got lost, just like the registered letter that got sent by us at the start of January. I simply cannot tell, and in court this would be a very nasty surprise from which I could hardly recover. What I can tell you right here is that I never received any written document regarding this topic of follow-up treatment ever. Even if such a letter did exist at one point, the fact that we failed to reply, while on the other hand keeping up our desperate efforts to get the medical documents, staying in contact constantly, should have led to some remarks coming from them in any case. I'm an autist, not a liar. I value my integrity, and I wouldn't lie about things like that. There would be no point in creating this video. This statement wouldn't be sufficient in court, of course, but I think for the purpose of this video and my channel, it will. One final note regarding court proceedings. With a short life expectancy of mine that will get reduced even further by the lack of follow-up treatment, my doctors don't have to be afraid at all. It's not possible to transfer any claims related to this to my mother after my death, and since cases like these oftentimes take more than 3, 5 or even 10 years to go up the escalating ladder of courts, the chances of me being able to see it through until the end are non-existent. I guess this is one of the upsides of working at a sarcoma surgery department. A huge chunk of the patients will be dead within a few years, so they are able to get away with almost anything unchecked. In addition, I cannot take legal actions from Japan, since I am required to show up in court personally. But to be frank, I prefer dying in Japan to wasting the rest of my lifetime on futile efforts to win against my hospital in court. Now in video number 7, I did mention that I had no trust in the opinion of the deputy head of the radiotherapy department, the guy with the 6 months. I think I know where he got his information from, because in the end, we are all looking at the same studies and papers. He simply misunderstood some statistical data. The lowest possible value on one graph was simply 0.5 years. There were no lower numbers possible, because the study was primarily focused on long-term prognosis, and by that I mean 10 to 20 years. You aren't using single months increments with a time span like this, and that's all there is to it. Well, now how should I deal with the situation at hand? Since the legal department is involved, I don't think that there are any blatant lies in this letter. I never heard of a time frame like this, and it would be interesting to know if doctors in the Netherlands or in Japan think of the issue the same way. And in case they do, it would render the new treatment that's in development by oncotherapy science in Japan my only option of treatment that's still applicable. Chemotherapy could be deployed, but no one has ever come up with proof that it offers any kind of benefit regarding overall survival. Synovial sarcomas, other than some other soft tissue and especially also some bone sarcomas, are more or less resistant to chemotherapy. What has been proven at the Royal Marsden Hospital in London is that chemotherapy might extend your life up to 9 months. In the best case, once you suffer from metastatic disease, as it has been observed, to be able to halt disease progression for this time period. But please keep in mind that we are not talking about reduction or even elimination of metastasis, just a temporary slowdown or stop to their growth. After that aforementioned period of time, the effect vanished again. Let's not talk about quality of life regarding these 9 months of chemotherapy regimen. And in addition to the general risks of chemotherapy that everyone has to deal with, I might lose my eyesight and or become reliant on dialysis in the process. This is because of my congenital glaucoma as well as my polycystic kidney disease. While the medical staff in Germany recommended chemo for me as well, even before the onset of metastatic disease, as I am what they like to call a high-risk patient, as I simply do it to do something. There's nothing else I can offer, and there's no proof that it's helpful at all. Chemotherapy, by the way, is very expensive, and so they will be able to make quite a few bucks thanks to it. No further comments on this one. I would really like to use audio quotes here from my own videos, where I foresaw this exact development. It's another do or die situation. Submit to the system in Germany or bite the dust. I might still make it, as there's this one treatment in Japan as well as another one that's getting tested in the United States right now. The latter is a targeted therapy combined with chemo, applicable to synovial sarcoma patients. How easy things could be if I would receive information like this from my doctors in Germany, or even some help on getting into these trials. But this is unfortunately just some feverish vision of mine with no relation to reality whatsoever. The only thing that I have is the internet, and it has proven to be way more resource and helpful than all the German doctors that earn tons of cash to, in theory, keep me alive as long and with the best quality of life possible. But then again, these guys simply fail at their job. My move to Japan makes even more sense right now. The reasons to pull it off get more numerous and not less over time, which is an interesting development by itself. A lot of people think of my plans as crazy, even ridiculous. From my point of view, staying in Germany and entrusting myself to medical personnel and also institutions, like the ones I already had to deal with, is a very definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. And this is not going to happen. I already pushed my luck a number of times, but even I will run out of it eventually. I'm not a god, not invincible, despite the number of times where I narrowly escaped death. Now that we got this down, let's take a brief look at the accusations that the doctor's tossing my way, like my alleged decision to avoid the urgently required radiation treatment. In video number 4, at a point in time where I didn't know yet about the new treatment option that is on the horizon in Japan, I made the comment that I'm willing to undergo a conventional radiotherapy, just not in Germany, because of my lack of trust towards the German healthcare system in general, as well as individual people involved. The Netherlands, Denmark, Norway or Japan would be destinations where I would be able to trust the people and or system in charge. I wouldn't have said no to a hospital like Dana-Farber, Memorial Sloan Kettering or City of Hope in the United States either. And all this contradicts his statement, and I made this remark public back in November 2017. I also told him and his colleagues that I want to get a second opinion and, if possible, also treatment outside of Germany, and that I would need my medical documents for this to happen. But they withheld all documents until this very day. Why not hand over the documents and just be done with it? They can offer the opinion on that my ideas regarding treatment abroad are nonsense and get rid of me without any risk on their part. Some might argue that they are so concerned about me that they didn't want to let me go, did not want to waste any more time. Oh really? Why ignore me then, letting time windows pass without any action or communication whatsoever? It appears that their primary goal is to prevent me from presenting my case somewhere else. Maybe they fucked up somewhere and other medical professionals might be able to notice it. The best way to brush stuff under the carpet right now is to not let me go and to reduce my life expectancy even further by messing up the only treatment they're able to offer themselves. I already pointed out a couple of times in my other videos that I would expect some kind of reassurance by the doctors here in Germany to assist me even when things should go wrong. The system won't be of any help to me, so if my survival and quality of life would be of any importance to them, they could use some of the leverage that they have as elite members of our society to help me on my way towards my goals, in the form of assisting at organizing and paying for flight to Japan with oxygen supply in case of lung metastasis, ordering some assistant doctor or medic to accompany me on the Trans-Siberian Railway for 10 to 12 days, tending to my radiotherapy-induced wounds on the way. They have hundreds of people at their disposal. Some of them are still in training and could make use of things like this, transforming it into a study or maybe scientific paper, which in turn could garner them credit points at the university, featuring me on the hospital's YouTube channel or establishing some contacts with local media. But they just don't give a fuck, and I simply don't like that. If the treatment would be without any serious risk, they could go ahead and promise me whatever, and they would never ever come close to a situation where they would be required to deliver. But apparently the risks are higher than officially proclaimed, and no one wants to take responsibility once the shit hits the fan. What I'm looking for is a glimpse of humanity, but for whatever reason, they simply cannot get a hold of this concept. Unfortunately, while no one of the doctors in question know about this YouTube channel right here, my decisions are quite easy to predict thanks to my autism and my old school concept of honor, loss of faith and responsibility. And once they got that figured out, it's pretty easy to push me into any direction that suits them best. Back in the 18th century, a duel would be required to settle things, Their behavior towards me is a disgrace that I cannot overlook, and it's impossible for me to act like nothing ever happened. My lawyer here in Germany thinks of this concept as being odd and outdated. I couldn't adhere to guidelines like this when my life is on the line. I should just suck it up and deal with it. Who cares about honor? That's what he's thinking. Well, I do care. Once you've lost as much as I did, dignity and honor are the only things left, and we're not willing to let go of them. I would be reduced to a mindless and obedient zombie if I did. Next up is the accusation that I decline coming in to discuss and clear things up. Well, that's not a lie, but I do have reasons for acting like that. I equipped my mother with all legally required mandates and asked her to make an appointment with the doctors in my state to discuss things. They declined talking to her, brushed her requests for documents aside. If I wouldn't be willing to show up personally, there would be no point in discussing anything. She had questions on her own, and they could have tried to approach me through my mother, as I never went there without her. She was present every day for the more than 2 weeks while I was an inpatient there, both pre and also succeeding my surgery. They simply cannot pretend that they don't know her or something. But wait, I guess they actually can, because contrary to what I'm legally entitled to thanks to my private insurance here in Germany, I got treated mostly by assistants who don't even have a proper doctor title yet, so they are still in training. No one of the so-called Oberärzte or Chefärzte, which act as heads or deputies of their respective departments, came to check up on me for more than 1 week post-surgery. In Germany, they are required to present some kind of contract to delegate responsibility and also eligibility of pay to other staff members if they need to be absent due to conferences, holidays, or sickness, for example. I never received such a contract. So in fact, they probably were unable to notice that my mom hung out in my room for like 8 to 10 hours every day. I bet there are remarks on that in my patient file though, as it's very unusual for a 37-year-old guy. They continued to shield themselves with things like violation of privacy rights if they talk to my mom and so on. I think they forgot how I asked everyone and their grandma across the whole hospital for my documents when I was still visiting there regularly myself. Why not send out these darn documents by mail to my address? What violation of privacy would that be? They did send tons of invoices where more medical information is present than in the official documents that we received so far. No one cared about privacy with those. They also don't care who's paying these bills on time. It's my mother, because I'm just tagging along with her own insurance as a family member. The staff at the hospital is just fabricating one excuse after the next to delay and obstruct things. I don't know why they act like this, but I'm certain that it's an ongoing issue with grave consequences for my well-being. Another thing where I won't be coming in, even for one last conversation, is the fact that I want to be able to prove things. I want facts and statements that I can rely on and that I can refer to, be it in front of other doctors, my YouTube audience, people that are willing to support me on my way, Japanese government officials, or some judge in a German courtroom. One big issue I have is that I never even received any kind of written invitation to appointments or something. All things got handled on the phone, face-to-face, or by email, all of which are unfit to act as evidence in court according to German laws and procedures. We had enough useless talks where I got brushed off, even insulted. I don't need any more of that. Since I only got my mother as company and therefore as a witness, I can't reliably prove anything of what has been said during these conversations either. We are family, and even with sworn-in testimony by my mother isn't worth much, at least not as much as the statements they will be able to come up with by tons of respected members of society of the upper echelon. I am sure that suddenly there will be loads of witnesses on their part, even if those people were never present. One thing that they are going to attack immediately is the fact that I got told that there will be 6 months left for me to undergo radiotherapy. The doctor will decline ever having said something like this. Our testimony is worthless compared to his and the couple of secretaries and assistant doctors that will pop up out of nowhere to aid their boss in return for a small favor and maybe some benevolent evaluations. Now, am I crazy? I know you wish I would be, but deep down you know that I'm right. It's just not very comforting to think about stuff like this, because if you ain't someone really important, the exact same thing can happen to you anytime. So better don't get sick, ever. Here's a small montage that I created regarding our efforts to get an appointment for my mom back in November 2017, since my own efforts to get my documents had been futile all the way. I already mentioned that they repeatedly declined talking to my mother without me being present, disregarding the fact that she was in possession of extensive mandates. While I do admit that it's unusual for someone my age, I don't think of it as completely unheard of that family members or a spouse would like to get a conversation / some information on their own, especially when there's as little information provided as was my case. As a date for a meetup with a doctor, 2:30 p.m. on the 30th of November 2017 had been proposed by his secretary under the condition that I would take part 2. With that in mind, my mom did not claim this appointment slot, stating that she was in fact disappointed by this kind of reaction, that she had questions on her own regarding the future treatment, life expectancy and so on. But then at 1:58 p.m. on November the 30th, 32 minutes before the appointment should have taken place, the chief surgeon himself sent out an email lifting the requirement for me to show up, stating that while he would fail to see any point in further conversations, as everything had supposedly been discussed and explained extensively already surrounding my hospital discharge, he would be willing to receive my mom, but just briefly. Now, of course, his reply had been way too late and we couldn't react in time. In fact, we only noticed this mail a couple hours later. Since the hospital is located in another city, getting there would have taken longer than the time frame available to my mom. So this appointment obviously failed to materialize. After this, my mom had to undergo surgery on her own behalf in early December 2017, notifying the hospital about it. Immediately after her discharge, she once again contacted the hospital in our quest for documents, but the hospital didn't respond anymore. After 2 weeks, we decided to go down the registered letter route to pave the way for legal action. I wanted to do this much earlier, but since doing things this way severely damages the relation between patients and medical staff, my mom talked me into delaying it. She was confident to be able to approach my doctors on a more civilized level than that, getting progress done without jeopardizing the relationship in the process. Unfortunately, like with my own efforts, we hit a brick wall once more. But I want to go into some other details of his reply as well. First, he states that they would of course be willing to provide me with all the documents, but that a mandate would be required for it, as he would be obliged to respect my privacy rights. That would also apply to my mother as well, as I'm not a child anymore. Now, this makes sense at first glance, but doesn't explain the fact why the hospital failed to offer me my documents while I was asking the chief sarcoma surgeon, the deputy head of the radiotherapy department, as well as other doctors and medical personnel there face-to-face repeatedly. Just hit the print button while my patient file is on screen, and a couple minutes later, the issue could have been solved without breaking a sweat. In addition, my mom has all the required mandates in place, since we already ran into issues like this the other way around when she suffered from a brain hemorrhage in 2013. From one day to the next, I had to take care of absolutely everything, and back then I did not have a mandate at all. I signed countless contracts and surgery plans, made treatment decisions in her stead, retrieved medical documents and so on, without the official right to do so. Luckily, no one ever asked for the mandates that I didn't have, so there was no random conservator put in charge by the local court, which neither my mom nor I would have wished for in the first place. While I disliked the hospitals and rehab facilities that we had to go to, the staff there knew about a thing called reality, where things just need to get done, no matter the legal mumbo-jumbo. My mom was unable to speak, write or give consent anymore at that time for quite a while, so I had to rely on my luck as well as the reality awareness of all the other people involved. In the aftermath, I learned my lesson, and as soon as she was able to do so, we went to see a notary and set everything up correctly, registering it at a nationwide database in the process. I'm her guardian now, and she's mine if things should go wrong, So it's not just a one-sided affair where I want to get at her non-existent money, put her in a nursing home at my leisure or whatever. Her doctors wanted to put her into one, but I was able to prevent it at the expense of 4 years of my life dedicated to the cause and my own health as well as all of our savings. That being said, how should my mom present these mandates when no one is willing to let her come in the first place? Because I am required to take along, and in that case there would be no need for mandates anyway. In her email correspondence, she clearly and repeatedly stated that mandates were on hand, but since they never offered another appointment after that, let's call it last-minute blunder, failing to respond to our inquiries from there on, it made no difference at all. They were perfectly fine with my mom signing every but one contract at the hospital though. Since my right arm was severely impaired, I only put my signature below the surgery plan where I disallowed any kind of amputation and enforced the rules of engagement that the chief sarcoma surgeon called functionality before radicalism, something that could also get translated as function before survival in this context. Usually people prefer it the other way around. All other papers and contracts got signed by my mother. No one ever wondered why her signature is everywhere while mine is nowhere to be found. And those contracts were about the stuff that really counts, and this is 5-figure bills. Do you think my privacy rights are more important to them than those 5-figure bills? I don't. And what else did he say? Well, he was kind of upset about the fact that I did not undergo radiotherapy yet. Something he apparently didn't know up to that point. I sense a perfect level of communication at that hospital and a lot of dedication to my case. The treatment would definitely be required, and I should come in personally so that they would be able to confer the urgency of the situation to me face to face. That actually sounds like a threat given the way they handled things in the months prior. Please note that the alleged end of the radiotherapy time frame had already passed at that point, where he wrote that mail. Still, he didn't mention it at all, instead preferring to stay ominous and vague. I guess talking about it would have been a violation of my privacy rights after all. I don't really feel like there's much urgency and haste involved in the actions, given the months of delays in providing my documents, given their inability to call, write letters or emails, given their reluctance to provide any kind of information on my disease, studies, clinical trials, life expectancy and so on. I don't want to come in anymore for the sole purpose so that they can set me straight of sorts, for the purpose of insulting me in my plans, of me being unable to prove anything that has been said during these appointments, so that they can get away with everything. I had my fair share of that already, not just at this hospital, but with other ones in the personnel in Germany as well. I know that things are getting handled differently elsewhere because of the 1 month that I spent in the Netherlands for cancer treatment. If not for that experience, I would really start to question my own sanity with all the things that go wrong in this shitty country called Germany, not just with my own health and life, but with my mother as well. What I do want is my medical data, because I don't have trust in the hospital and its personnel. I want other hospitals and doctors to manage my case, to provide follow-up treatment and a second opinion outside of Germany, if at all possible. I'm ready to go now for months, but I need my data to set things in motion. When they are that concerned about me, why do they prefer me to not undergo any kind of treatment in case it's not going down at their own hospital? They do know for what purpose I need my documents for, and that's why they are keeping them locked up. I guess a dead patient is less threatening to them as a patient leaving Germany, presenting his case, and with this also their own work abroad. Thinking about this, trying to understand the reason and motivation behind their behavior is actually making me sick. Whatever cause it may be in the end, it's some pretty fucked up shit either way. We are talking about physical limitations here that cannot be remedied no matter what money you have on hand or what people are in charge. Some things are impossible to fix once the damage is done. They will probably claim that they wanted to protect me by enforcing treatment in Germany, protecting me from my own plans, so to speak. But I don't need that kind of daddy, and I will tell you what kind of daddy I'm looking for. How about a team of leading surgeons in one of the biggest hospitals in Germany have a sit-in, looking at my life in the process and deciding, oh well, this guy ended up drawing the short end of the stick for decades now. He is an avid collector of worst-case scenarios regarding almost every aspect of life imaginable. Now struck with this cancer, his life expectancy is kind of shitty, and there isn't that much that we in Germany can do about it. He wants to go to Japan, the only thing he would have ever managed to pull off in life. Let's make an exception and help this guy to get going. We got the contacts needed and also a bit of cash. In turn, we asked him to submit himself to our radiation treatment, and after that we will see him off. Regardless of any side effects, we will make sure that he's going to meet his minimal goals of reaching Japan and getting buried there. And after this is decided, we will have a meetup, seal the deal by handshake like men of old did. No contracts required, just a promise among honorable people. That's some kind of guardian or daddy that I can relate to. Ask something of me and offer some stuff in return. Not ask something of me and then leave me with my wounds, saying that life is a bitch and then you die, better luck next life. That I would be suffering from a severe disease and that anything could happen anytime. That I would have been fully aware of treatment risks, pointing at my signature that I put into form. I don't need any of that. I want people to assume at least some kind of responsibility, if not for the reason of being a doctor, then for humanitarian reasons. But there's nothing like this to be expected in Germany. Of course, they are just acting professional and stuff, maybe. But while this kind of professionalism might save some people's lives, it also sacrifices the lives of people like me. Since I am but a minority, it's of no concern to anyone though, not even to the doctors in charge. I do have a different definition of concern that doesn't include letting someone sit there without documents and the consequence of this, without treatment, because he's not acting the way I want him to. Protect people by killing them. While it does sound insane, it apparently has some merit to it, at least for a certain group of German medical personnel. This is what I have to say in reply to all the accusations that are getting thrown my way. Sorry for repeating myself here and there, but this topic is really getting to me, and so my composure is somewhat negatively affected. I hope that at least some people watching this will start to become a bit more suspicious about one of the best healthcare systems in the world. The big and almighty doctor we are talking about, chief of the sarcoma surgery department, showed some very unusual behavior during the few times we were able to talk face to face. His eyes were constantly rolling upwards as he closed them, eyelids trembling. He was extremely nervous, couldn't stay still for even just half a minute. He made really strange and inappropriate remarks and demonstrations on how I would look like post-surgery, making jokes about disabilities and spastic people. He was almost hysteric. Overall, I was under the impression that he was suffering from some kind of tic, maybe even seizures. Maybe he can only keep going with drugs due to an extreme workload or whatever. I guess he noticed that I was aware of this, and so he tried to avoid dealing with me as much as possible from there on. Some quick research regarding the eyes constantly rolling upwards yielded a lot of results pointing to either drug abuse or epilepsy. Another reason might be extremely high blood pressure, being just inches away from losing consciousness. Well, of course, I won't be able to pinpoint the exact cause myself. There's a chance that this guy shouldn't be operating patients all day with his disposition, whatever it may be. Since I was still pre-surgery with a giant bleeding wound that could kill me any day, I didn't want to direct attention towards these issues and risk some sort of meltdown, so I remained quiet. Another reason for me was that I'm struck with so many disabilities that I would never criticize another person for having some of their own. It's a topic I would rather avoid if at all possible. I don't want to be like the guys who made my life as difficult as it turned out to be. All these delays and obstacles that I've been encountering for the last couple of months point to the possibility of a rather huge mess up on behalf of my hospital or the people in charge, and that they are trying very hard to keep things under the rug. Why do they keep on playing stupid games with a guy like me? Pre-surgery, I was hoping that some of the other numerous staff members would step up, if in fact there would be a problem with the chief surgeon. But since there are some cases that went public where other heads of hospital departments and renowned and large hospitals in Germany I used lemon juice for disinfection of the operating rooms as well as the surgery tools for years, just to save a few bucks, without anyone stepping up from the shadows. You can't be sure of this either. Several people died to this, even more required amputations. And finally, the truth broke national media. I'm pretty sure the guy or girl responsible for uncovering the whole affair still has a hard time making any kind of progress in terms of career. No one needs or values these small-time incarnations of Edward Snowden. That this guy was forced to flee to Russia, going through China of all places, should act as a reminder on how fucked up the world we live in really is, behind the curtains and below the shiny surface. Now, with all this being said, I'm not really keen on fighting the hospital, the chief sarcoma surgeon or whatever. What I want to do is to stop fighting and start living for a short while. I want to explore Japan by car, drive to a beach, just sit there, listening to the crashing waves for a whole day straight. I won't profit from messing with the lives of other people, from making it more difficult for them. Some folks, when forced to walk in my shoes, would try their luck and extort the shit out of this doctor, but I'm one of the good guys, so there won't be anything like that. I've never caused any harm to living or inanimate entities in this world, and I will stick to this path. If there are some reporters, lawyers or members of the police interested in some of the stuff already covered, or stuff that is going to get covered at some point down the road, also regarding my father, I'm willing to cooperate, but as things stand, I'm not about to ignite any kind of revolution. I'm very tired, to be honest. I could have been that guy maybe a decade ago, but now it's too late. Please assist me in one way or another. There's no need for me to become a social media star or whatever. I just want to find peace at the end of my life, and that will only be possible with some help from the outside. One thing that is left for me to do in this video is to present the registered letter that I sent to the hospital, the one that finally forced them to react. I think of it as one-sided and unfair to just present their reply and criticize it. I could have insulted or even threatened them or whatever, who knows. So if you're interested, you can check out my letter too. Sorry for the small font and stuff, but widescreen resolutions aren't really meant to accommodate full-size documents at a glance. I can send out PDFs, etc. in case there's a serious request. Now let's get it on. Regrettably, the following matter needs to get addressed first. On January the 3rd, 2018, we sent out a registered letter. The contents of this letter were mostly identical to the one you are reading right now. Therein, we set a deadline that has now become obsolete thanks to the shortcomings on behalf of the carrier, resulting in the loss of the letter. Should you, against all odds, still receive this outdated letter at some point, I ask you to ignore its contents as well as the deadline. Only this letter right here, sent on Friday, January the 12th, 2018, is of relevance as of now. But enough of this, let's get to the point. Over the course of the past weeks, we received 3 identical letters of discharge from your hospital. The first 2 letters were originally created on October the 16th, 2017, as well as on October the 28th, 2017 respectively, and both of which arrived on December 23rd, 2017. And after this, we received the 3rd iteration of this exact same letter on January the 3rd, 2018, but this time a short summary of a tumor board conference that took place in October 2017 was included. The information contained within is far from being sufficient, and we sincerely hope that decisions that are being made during these conferences are not solely based upon this rather lackluster amount of information. With my registered letter, sent out December the 15th, 2017, I made the repeated effort of asking you to provide the complete medical documents and test results of my son. These are required to, among other things, request financial support of a cancer foundation so that my son can continue treatment abroad. For that purpose, we need to fill out several forms, which turned out to be an impossible task given the limited amount of medical information that is included with the letter of discharge. Unfortunately, this very letter of discharge also fails to be of help getting answers to the numerous questions we directed towards you in our registered letter from December 15th, 2017. We already approached you with the intent on getting these questions answered several times before, without success. Please bear with my son, as with such an aggressive cancer as the one that he is suffering from, he is in the process of re-evaluating his life. That being said, it is still a viable option for him to move to Japan permanently before his fading health will render him unable to see through, thanks to the assortment of negative and derogatory comments coming from a number of doctors at your hospital, directed towards medical personnel in the Netherlands. We are well aware of the fact that foreign medicine expertise isn't valued or respected in Germany. Compared to Germany, increased chances of survival concerning various types of cancer in the United States, but especially in Japan, are hints that this kind of arrogant attitude is not justified at all. At least that's the conclusion that we, as individuals without medical training, came up with. Unfortunately, there's also a lack of professionalism regarding the handling of patients, not just by the doctors themselves, but also the rest of the medical and technical staff at your hospital. In conjunction with the radiotherapy planning, my son asks the staff on site for English language planning documents that they at least convey these requests to the one in charge. This question led to widespread amusement among the staff, and my son was in turn subjected to inappropriate jokes and comments for the whole duration of the procedure, right up to the time of his departure. Since this is Germany, there would in turn only be German language documents. The staff couldn't refrain from loud and open laughter in the face of his request. My son got approached repeatedly, even while he was back in the changing room, busy dressing up again. Every time a comment was made this way, the staff member responsible hurried back to the other colleagues, and together they had a fun time making jokes about my son. If he would be so keen on proving his language skills, he could get some English language questionnaires to fill out. Well, finally, someone cared to ask why English language documents would be required in the first place. As a reaction to this, my son mentioned the topic of resistant bacteria in Germany. Combined with other circumstances, it would lead to a situation where treatment abroad would in fact appear reasonable. The response of the staff was an advice to refrain from unprotected intercourse and to avoid sitting down on any of the hospital toilets in the hospital while suffering from open wounds. With these precautions in mind, he would be safe from any infections, no need to worry anymore. Something that the staff didn't know: my son is, thanks to his numerous disabilities, still a virgin at age 37, and therefore particularly susceptible to mockery along these lines. This is one of the reasons why you should refrain from making comments like this, especially while being a medical professional. What the staff should have known is that it isn't just a faint possibility that during the course of a full-blown radiation treatment there is a notable risk of developing bleeding, festering wounds. At the end of the day, these insensitive as well as inconsiderate people are working as medical personnel and technicians at a huge and specialized center for radiation treatment, a center that claims to be one of the leading institutions in cancer treatment in Germany, maybe even beyond. One thing that might serve as a small relief for the person in question is the fact that thanks to the non-existent communication between the various hospital departments, no one on site had just the slightest clue about my son and the disease he is suffering from. Maybe there would have been a slightly more professional approach if they would have been aware of the severity of his disease, that there's no cure available, and that the main purpose of treatment is to prolong life for an uncertain amount of time. Given our experiences in Germany so far, this well-meant presumption is nothing that we would place any bets on, though. Usually, you would file a complaint about occurrences like this, but since we were treated with the same undertone and arrogance by all of the superiors at which these complaints would need to get directed at, we thought of this endeavor as being a waste of both time and energy. This incident turned out to be the final straw for my son. As a consequence, he concluded that it would be for the best to refrain from visiting this hospital of yours in the future. We think that even as someone suffering from a severe type of cancer with a grim prognosis, you shouldn't be forced to endure treatment and handling like this time and time again. Another remark on the resistant bacteria issue, where my son was required to provide samples for the purpose of a new MRSA test preceding the actual radiotherapy planning. The nurse tasked with the job of getting the samples appeared to be extremely afraid of my son, trying her best not to get too close to him. Did the supply of protective gloves run out, or did my son in fact harbor some infectious disease on which the hospital failed to relay any kind of information? Maybe there is a huge number of infected patients hailing from the surgical center, or the ward in particular, where my son was an inpatient. Who knows? Anyway, my son was way too surprised to question this strange behavior. Usually, the CEO is afraid of hospitals, their staff and patients. Experiencing things the other way around is something he isn't used to. The hospital did order various tests, both in-house as well as externally, and while we received loads of invoices, all of them duly paid by the way, we know absolutely nothing about the results of these tests. For our own process of decision-making, these results are of utmost importance. Out of desperation, my son resorted to re-establish contact with the Dutch doctors in Rotterdam, asking them for help. Since I accompanied him on his quest for cancer treatment in the Netherlands, staying with him overnight at the hospital where we received treatment with no additional costs involved, it's not too difficult for me to comprehend the underlying reasoning and motivation responsible for this course of action. The attention and empathy that we received in the Netherlands are nowhere to be found in Germany. Doctors, nurses, as well as patients in the Daniel de Hut Cancer Center in Rotterdam and elsewhere were very supportive, and everyone demonstrated a lot of compassion towards us. A recognition of the rarity as well as the severity of the disease was a given. Due to the limitations enforced upon us by my own brain hemorrhage that occurred in 2013, my son will be reliant on outside help to realize his plans. In countries like the United Kingdom, France, or the United States, this kind of support is regularly provided by treating hospitals, universities that are researching corresponding diseases, or various cancer trusts and foundations. In Germany, on the other hand, you are left alone with a situation like this. As you've already pointed out a number of times, my son is in no position to spend a couple more months or even years contemplating his next move. As early as with the first post-surgery appointment, we asked you to provide the required medical documents. This was 2.5 months ago. Your reluctance to provide us with English language documents on your own might be comprehensible on legal grounds alone, but we fail to see the reasoning and motivation responsible for your continued efforts to delay as well as obstruct the handover of these documents in German, especially since the required translation on our behalf will eat up additional valuable time. One thing brought forth repeatedly by you is also reason of concern to us, that we have to reckon with additional weeks of delay abroad prior to any treatment. With the documents on hand, it's impossible for my son to get a second opinion or further treatment, not even in Germany. Hospitals and doctors will demand additional information that we cannot provide by ourselves. Let's not speak of the bad image that we would suffer from because we are approaching them barehanded, while my son is suffering from such a severe disease. No one would expect the medical professionals in Germany to act the way you decided upon, and the blame would be on us. In most people's minds, stuff like this cannot happen with allegedly high standard of treatment that is taken for granted in Germany. Even preparing a fit-to-fly assessment is impossible without these missing documents. You would surely agree that getting one of these before embarking on a very long-distance flight is a reasonable, maybe even mandatory precaution. Now, even if you and your colleagues are unwilling or unable to provide any kind of assistance or sympathy, you should at least enable us to ask for help elsewhere. This isn't even related to you being a doctor, having sworn the Hippocratic Oath. One should be able to expect a minimal level of humanity, given your position in society and the education that is required to get this far. Are you aware of the fact that your actions and behavior only serve to reinforce the opinion of my son that in Germany no humane treatment can be expected? Don't you feel some kind of motivation to set things straight, to prove that his assumption is false? You are treating him like some lifeless object in need of repair. There's not even a subtle hint of inclusion, explanation, or just some recognition of circumstances other than the cancer itself If not for the more moderate line of some of your assistants, who were willing to compromise to some extent, my son would have died before any surgery could have taken place. Regarding the well-being of your future patients, I can only ask you to rethink the way you are handling things. As an experienced medical professional specialized in cancer treatment, you and your whole team are supposed to know about the fact that social and psychological circumstances do play anything but a little role regarding overall prognosis, especially with such a rare and unusual case like my son. Given the discussions and written correspondence, it appears to be unlikely that you are completely unaware of these special circumstances. My son did provide you and your team with documents that are self-explanatory. I'm afraid that I have to conclude that regarding my son, the situation has deteriorated to a point where there's no cooperation, no trust build-up possible anymore. Unfortunately, there have been issues with this exact lack of trust right from the get-go. Given the life-threatening situation and your lack of support in assisting us to obtain a second or maybe even third opinion pre-surgery, my son had no other choice than to submit himself to your treatment. How odd it seems that you are putting in a lot of effort to advertise for your own second opinion service for people that come to your hospital. In addition, the ongoing referencing to surgeons in private practice, general practitioners or even nursing services to handle the required bandage swabs pre-surgery left us baffled up to this very day. Everywhere we went to get these bandage swabs, we got turned down. We were forced to spend a considerable amount of money on cab fares in the process. As an expert on these matters, you should have known that no one outside of a hospital, without emergency and intensive care at the ready, would have dared to handle the massive wound my son was suffering from. After all, it is Germany we are talking about, not the Netherlands. One might even become suspicious, in the face of all the ongoing and mindless referencing, that the situation created by this should first and foremost serve to assist you in putting pressure on my son, so that he would be forced to accept whatever kind of treatment you envisioned, without him being allowed to have a say in regard to the decision-making. You weren't even able to provide us with instructions on how often the bandages should get renewed. Everyone we encountered at your hospital had a different opinion on this. In the end, this led to ingrowth of one of the 3 large bandages into the necrotic wound. No one at your hospital dared to mess around with this bandage anymore. This didn't come as a surprise, since a massive and life-threatening hemorrhage would have been the consequence. Without a timely surgery, this bandage ingrowth by itself would have hastened the death of my son. Now these things were either some tactical games that you played to move things into the direction you wanted, or chaos like this is an everyday occurrence at your hospital, and I have trouble deciding which would be worse. It required an overwhelmed but courageous surgeon in private practice whose patience ran out to force you to reconsider your approach. You had no other choice once you produced a hospital referral due to the wound being impossible to manage in an outpatient environment. As we presented this referral and explained the situation, it looked like you wanted to exert pressure on this independent surgeon with the help of our healthcare insurance, but apparently this backfired, and from there on things developed in a way that you didn't plan for. My son had to put in an enormous effort to alter the surgery goals so that his wishes as a patient would at least get partially recognized. Your initial surgery plans that, given the best possible outcome projected by you, would have resulted in the complete loss of function of the right shoulder as well as the right upper arm would have caused massive problems for my son. He was particularly afraid of being left alone, left to his own devices with a severe disability like this. As it turned out, it wasn't just some exaggeration on his part, as this is exactly the way things went down in reality, as we can clearly see now. Of course, you cannot be held responsible for the overall situation in Germany, but taking these things into consideration was something that we did expect of you. Since my son already anticipated most of these problems, in addition to being aware of his own lackluster circumstances of life, he didn't want to complete this rare and scientifically interesting surgery, as well as the follow-up treatment in Germany. But other than with the medical personnel in the first German hospital, where my son was forced to receive emergency treatment once his tumor burst open, he didn't want to make you feel his prejudices regarding the German healthcare system. In the meantime, he lost an important trump card while receiving nothing in return. Not even a clinical trial or study participation was offered to him. We are well aware of the fact that you and your colleagues are very proud of the surgery results. With a surgery like this, it is probably impossible to avoid widespread and also large scars. My son will have to come to terms with this on his own. A wholly different matter is that even today, 3 months post-surgery, there either still is a large swelling located at his armpit, or, as an alternative explanation, you put way too much skin in that area so that a rather large bulge has been created. Maybe you will be able to understand why my son wants some other doctors and yourself to check up on it. With you, once again, being unable to provide any kind of comment or evaluation of the MRI scans that you ordered us to get done at another hospital, these images might be able to explain what exactly is going on with the armpit issue that just got described. And while we are at it, how much time would be required between the completion of a full course of conventional radiotherapy until my son could get further plastic surgery going to fix this problem that got created by you, until other doctors would be willing to approach the irradiated areas? While the acuity of my son has definitely decreased due to the already completed surgery, his aim is to avoid making the same mistake again and again, instead opting to continue follow-up treatment at some other location where he can expect at least some professionalism, empathy and support. There's just this one chance left for him to salvage the small stretch of life that is still left. And this is not just about the cancer, a concept that apparently is either difficult to grasp or of no relevance at all for German doctors. While we are sorry that we have to go like a bull at the gate with this letter, the situation at hand leaves us no other choice. We refrained from coming forth with any kind of accusations over the course of the last months as to not endanger the possibility of cooperation or even treatment. These hopes, as well as the self-induced restraints, have been in vain, unfortunately. Despite, or maybe even because of this, we ask you once more to come up with answers / statements concerning the following questions and requests. Why did you disregard proton therapy? As far as we know, your hospital is one of the selected few in Germany that is able to offer this kind of treatment. It's advertised on your homepage as well. What about the plans regarding conventional radiotherapy? What radiation doses are planned and what areas are to be irradiated, especially during the boost phase? Some rough sketch with a ball pen on a piece of paper without any information on doses whatsoever can't be the only thing that you can come up with. Are there any alternative treatments aside from conventional radiotherapy and chemotherapy that you can offer at your hospital? Is there a place in Germany where there's more than that available? What are the options concerning clinical trials and study participations that are applicable for the synovial sarcoma of my son throughout the whole of Germany? What about other countries? Aren't you supposed to inform us in the event of applicable treatments and trials abroad? Synovial sarcomas are a very rare disease, and thus the related medical / research cosmos is rather limited. As you've claimed yourself a couple of times already, you are taking part in various conferences and meetings of sarcoma experts around the world on a regular basis, so you should be aware of any new development. The decision on what risks are acceptable, if those risks are of a short or long-term nature, what costs or other consequences go along with it and so on, it should be up to my son. In case he would prefer an experimental treatment due to his priorities and the way his life played out up to this point, it's his decision as a grown-up. We think that you should inform us on all available options, no matter if your own hospital is able to offer them or not. Even in case that there are no options in Germany and just abroad, you are still obliged to provide information on them at least. After all, it's not like you could come up with a cure at your hospital. Or did we make a huge mistake interpreting all available studies and papers? With the data and results that you had access to for quite a while now, it should be easy for you to prepare an estimate on the life expectancy of my son, calculated both with and without adjuvant radiotherapy. Furthermore, the image data that you have at hand is essential for us to plan any kind of follow-up treatment. We are talking about pre- and post-surgery MRI data as well as the CT scans made by the Center for Radiation Treatment. including thorax and abdomen scans, as well as the ones that got created for the purpose of radiation therapy planning? Did you order any lung or brain CT scans to screen for metastatic disease? Yes? Then we need those too. In addition, we ask for full pathology reports, both by your own pathology laboratory as well as the external one, that you tasked with doing more complex tests. Also, results of the various blood and MRSA samples, as well as protein S deficiency test that Masan asked you to perform pre-surgery. And don't forget the surgery reports themselves. Did you leave behind markers during surgery as required by guidelines to help with any additional surgeries should they become necessary? We would like to know what muscles, etc. Actually got removed during surgery aside from the tumor itself. What kind of samples did you take and what were the results of these tests? The invoices we received from various laboratories and doctors show some discrepancies compared with the results that got published. We have a hard time believing that you didn't take any photos or videos surrounding the actual surgery. We would like to get access to them as well. Even with the more or less one-of-the-mill lower chest surgery that I had to undergo in December 2017, they recorded videos which they presented on their own accord on the day of my discharge. And this surgery took place in a small and unknown hospital in our own city that cannot compare itself to an institution of your size. Attached to this letter, you will find a form through which I ask you, as a hospital, to provide me with all the requested documents as copies. We will reimburse you regarding the costs for copies and material, as well as postage. This part right here is an excerpt from a court ruling that took place in 2017. It's about the right of patients in Germany to have access to their medical documents, and that hospitals are not allowed to keep those documents locked up. The only thing that is allowed is to remove the names and especially the private addresses of the treating doctors, unless the patient can prove a legitimate interest in obtaining them. People from Germany might be able to make use of the reference number provided in case they run into similar issues than we did. Should you fail to provide these documents as of the 26th of January 2018, we are forced to take legal action. The nature and severity of the actions in question will be dependent on the further development of my son's health. Please put an end to this unsavory charade. The path that lies before us will be difficult enough already, even without your incomprehensible behavior. Thank you for your effort. We remain in anticipation of you relenting, and then some signatures. Well, now this is it. Stay tuned for more shockers coming straight from the German healthcare system. Thank you for your patience, and time for me to sign off. See you later.